What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 3 top 40 running back rankings, splitting these guys up into different tiers. I think I went through my top 30 a couple days ago. Now we're expanding it. Maybe a few updates here based on injuries, things like that. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Any questions, drop them down below. And let's just dive right into tier 1 here. And I do just want to throw out a few names that I'm going to be assuming are out. So Isaiah Pacheco, definitely out this week with that fractured fibula. We have Kenneth Walker, who I think is leaning towards missing here, his second straight game with his oblique injury. And then at this point, I don't think the odds are great for Joe Mixon playing. The time that I'm recording this, he has not practiced this week with that ankle injury. And we've also seen Dameon Pierce not practice. So the guy I'm going with in these rankings is going to be Cam Akers. Obviously, if we get new information, you can drop me a question. I'll make sure to answer it before the games. But starting off here in tier 1, we have Bijan Robinson as my top option. I think his usage has been really strong. I think he's looked great with those opportunities. Kirk Cousins playing better, I think, is a good sign moving forward. So I still really like Bijan Robinson as like the top dog here. Him and Breece Hall would still be my, RB1, RB2. Some people might have changed it up with guys like Saquon, Alvin Kamara, but for me, I'd still be rolling with Breece and Bijan. But I wouldn't be too worried about the order of these top dudes because obviously you're playing them, regardless of whether they're ranked 1 or 4 in my rankings. Number 2, going to be Saquon Barkley. Had a monster week 1, a little bit of a step back in week 2, but still a very, very strong performance. Going up against the Saints here, he's obviously a locked-in high-end running back 1. Then we have Jordan Mason, who has pretty much gone from like handcuff to locked in high-end running back 1 until CMC returns. In 2 weeks, he has put up 22.2 and 17.4 PPR points. The Rams have allowed the 5th most points per game to the running back position, and I think it might get ugly here in this one. Like, this should be a great game script for Jordan Mason. The Rams offense is just completely devastated by injuries at this point. So this could be a game where the 49ers get ahead. Jordan Mason is going to have a ton of opportunities. Deebo Samuel is going to be out for this one, and he's someone that could have come in, taken some opportunities away from Jordan Mason. He's going to have a large workload, doesn't have a ton of receiving upside, but I just don't think he's going to need it here on this 49ers offense. And then my final tier 1 running back is going to be Alvin Kamara. Through 2 weeks, he is the clear-cut running back 1. I had some concerns coming into the season. It seemed like he had kind of fallen off over the last couple of years. He's come out looking like a workhorse, been absolutely dominant through 2 weeks, so I have to feel great if you did draft Alvin Kamara. Now, shifting into tier 2, the first guy in this tier is going to be Devon Achane. I really loved Achane heading into the year, and I think I've been very excited with what we've seen through 2 weeks. In week 2, this man had 22 carries and 7 targets. That type of usage is insane for him with the efficiency he showcased last year. Now, obviously, the injury to Tua is going to be a hit to him. The efficiency might not be as great as what we saw last year. It'd be pretty impossible for him to get to what we saw last year, but I still think he's a very good running back. McDaniel's going to set him up for good opportunities, and just the fact that they are willing to give him more volume, I don't really even want this on a week-to-week basis, but the fact that in certain situations they are willing to kind of force feed him, I think is a great sign for Devon Achane. And then he's also just been super involved as a pass catcher, 7 targets in both games. That's an area where I kind of expected improvement, and we have seen that through the first couple of weeks. My running back 6 is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Hasn't had a crazy start to the season, but no reason he shouldn't be considered like a top 12 running back moving forward. Then I have Jahmyr Gibbs. Been solid through 2 weeks. I think he settles in here nicely as a mid-tier RB1. Then I have James Cook coming off a monster performance on Thursday Night Football, a 3-touchdown game. I talked about this in the video earlier in the week, but the thing that really stood out to me was the fact that he got a goal line carry. If he can at least filter in on the goal line, Josh Allen's probably going to take most of those opportunities, but if he can get a few goal line touchdowns, that could be big for his overall upside this season. And then the final running back going to be Josh Jacobs. I think he's been limited at some practices with a back injury, but that's kind of been going on over the past couple of weeks. Not super concerned. When he's out there, they are force feeding him. I don't think he's going to have Jordan Love, so they're probably going to go with a very run-heavy approach like we saw last week. So Josh Jacobs should be a nice option. Now shifting into tier 3, starting off here with Travis Etienne. And for Etienne, I guess I've been a little bit weary on what the usage has looked like. It does not look like he is going to replicate his 2023 usage when he was like a 75+% opportunity share guy, 6th in opportunity share at the running back position. And I don't think that's a killer right? If he's still getting the valuable opportunities, he should still be fine. The one thing that's a little bit concerning is that Dearness Johnson was kind of cutting the goal line work, which if you're not going to dominate the touches, you at least want to dominate the valuable ones, the third downs, the receiving role, goal line, all of that stuff. So I'm being a little bit cautious here with Travis Etienne, but I still view him as like a top 10 guy, a back end RB1. Then we have Derrick Henry going up against the Cowboys. The Cowboys just got shredded by Alvin Kamara. I don't even really know what to make of that game. Like, is Derrick Henry going to go out and do a similar thing? Are the Saints just like on a different level to start off the season? For Henry, I kind of feel like this is just where he's going to be settling in as like a fringe running back one. If you get into the end zone, he's probably going to be a hit. If he doesn't score, he's probably going to be disappointing in your lineup because he's not adding anything as a pass catcher. And then the final guy in this tier is going to be Zach Charbonnet. Maybe it seems like he doesn't fit in with these names, Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry, but this is obviously going to be assuming that Kenneth Walker is out. And last week, Zach Charbonnet had insane usage, 96% snap share, 71% route participation. He had 14 carries, 5 targets. He literally took every single opportunity at the running back position. So he could do that again here against the Dolphins. We just saw James Cook shred this defense. So I do like Zach Charbonnet as an RB1 this week. And then tier 4, just 2 running backs here. One guy has been great to start off the season. That's James Conner. The usage has been fantastic. He's getting a lot of looks in the red zone. It's just kind of a tough matchup here against the Lions, who have allowed the 5th fewest points per game to the running back position. But if you drafted James Conner, I mean, you should feel great about that pick. And then the other running back here is Kyren Williams. And Kyren's kind of tough to evaluate here because through 2 weeks, the usage has been very, very strong. But you just look at this Rams offense, the wide receiver position, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, the offensive line has kind of been shredded here. And you have a pretty tough matchup here against this 49ers defense. So I could definitely see a world where Kyren Williams gets a lot of usage, has a lot of receiving work, might not be super efficient, but he could still produce, give you a solid fantasy day. But I could also see the world where this Rams offense just completely face plants and Kyren Williams kind of disappoints in your fantasy lineup. So kind of a tough balance there. Now pivoting into tier 5, kind of a large tier here. I think you could make some arguments for some of these dudes being higher or lower. Some of this usage early in the season is probably still a little bit uncertain, but I want to start off by talking about Zach Moss. And this might seem high considering the fact that he kind of flopped last week for fantasy, but the usage certainly did not flop. Week 2, he had an 80% snap share, 63% route participation. He took 75% of the carries. If he carries that usage from that Chiefs game into this matchup against the Commanders, he is going to be an absolute smash play in a significantly better matchup. Then we have Tony Pollard going up against the Packers, who has really started off the season as the clear-cut RB1. This is not even sniffing a committee. He's at a 71% opportunity share. He's top 10 in both carries and targets. Then we have David Montgomery going up against the Cardinals. Never going to be a super high ceiling option with Jahmyr Gibbs playing, but he's been solid through 2 weeks, on a good offense, has a lot of touchdown upside on this Lions offense. Then we have J.K. Dobbins. I did bump him up a couple of spots from my last rankings video. I know a lot of people were upset he was, kind of ranked too low. I think people are still going to think he's too low here, but it really just comes down to the fact that he is not yet pulled away in terms of his opportunities when he's been on the field. J.K. Dobbins has been amazing, but he's hovering around a 50% opportunity share. And in a tougher matchup against the Steelers, that could be a recipe for a very low floor because he hasn't been overly involved as a pass catcher. And so if it's kind of an ugly game script, him and Gus Edwards are still splitting carries close to 50-50, you could easily end up with like 15 carries, 60 yards, 1 reception, 10 yards, no touchdowns, and then it's just not a great performance. So I'm not trying to dump on J.K. Dobbins here. He's been amazing. He's been ultra efficient. He's had 2 monster games. He's the most rushing yards over expected out of every single NFL running back. But I would just like to see him pull away from Gus Edwards. And realistically, he should, right? Like, he's been amazing. Gus Edwards has not been good. But just through 2 weeks, we have not seen that separation in terms of their usage. So that's my kind of minor concern here with J.K. Dobbins. And that's why I'm not like completely skyrocketing him up into like top 12 territory. If he can pull away, be the clear-cut running back 1, and continues balling out, I will definitely be moving him up in these rankings moving forward. After Dobbins, going with Aaron Jones, solid start to the season, going up against the Texans. I think he's an interesting guy because he's pretty game script proof. He can give you a decent amount of carries if they're winning, if they're trailing. He can be super involved as a pass catcher. Then I have Rachaad White, who I'm probably a little bit lower on than consensus. I have real concern that he's going to start to lose out on his workload. He's also dealing with a groin injury. He has just not been good through 2 weeks. He has not been good as a runner in year 1, also year 2. Now it's translating into year 3. I think Bucky Irving is going to see a bigger role, and I think it could just continue to, get closer together moving forward. 2 more guys in this tier. The first one is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. Just a really strong start to the season, strong usage on the ground. He's been effective. Not the best matchup here against the Bengals. I think B-Rob's going to do better in much closer game scripts. You'd hope they'd be ahead in games, but that's probably not going to happen a ton. I still think he's a nice back-end RB2 play. And then the final guy in this tier, I mentioned him very early on in this video. It's going to be Cam Akers. At this point, I think Joe Mixon is going to miss, and I think Dameon Pierce is also going to be out. Dameon Pierce had been the guy, who looked like the handcuff for Joe Mixon. But if both those two are out, then it's going to be Cam Akers, and this might end up being low because if the running back room is just completely gutted, like they might be force-feeding Cam Akers. I do think Dare Ogunbowale could kind of work in, especially on the pass-catching downs, but I still think Cam Akers is a very solid play if you do need a running back. Now, looking at tier 6, I want to start off with Devin Singletary, and his usage has been very strong. He just has the downside of having a tough matchup here against the Browns, and then also just being on a not-so-great offense. Then I have Najee Harris, who's had a pretty solid workload also through 2 weeks, especially in the carry department. He's going to have a lot of volume in that area. The problem is that even though he's had the solid workload, it hasn't really translated to great fantasy production because he has not yet gotten into the end zone. So could he get into the end zone here against the Chargers? Sure. I think he definitely has more touchdown upside than Jaylen Warren, but you're obviously not banking on it. Then we have DeAndre Swift, and this is kind of a tough call with Swift because you have to balance how rough he's looked with his usage and then also how strong this matchup looks, because the Colts have allowed the most running back rushing yards through 2 weeks. They've really just been like gutted back-to-back weeks. Joe Mixon week 1, Josh Jacobs week 2. Swift hasn't looked good, so maybe this is a get-right game for this Bears rushing attack, but I also think, Swift's usage might not stick if he continues to not play at a super high level. So fringe RB2 territory. Then I have Carson Steele, and maybe this seems too high for Steele. I know some people prefer Samaje Perine. Some people probably think Kareem Hunt's going to come in and take over the job. If I had to pick one of these dudes that I think is going to be super relevant moving forward, in my opinion, it is Carson Steele. And it's because he already had somewhat of a role before the Isaiah Pacheco injury. Like Samaje Perine, I think had 1 target, 0 carries in that week 2 game. So even when, Isaiah Pacheco was out, he was still not getting very involved. Carson Steele in week 2 saw 4 of the 8 goal line snaps. I think he slides in kind of more easy to that early down role, the goal line work, which is what we were seeing Isaiah Pacheco do. So Carson Steele, like him as a high-end RB3 play. Maybe Kareem Hunt comes in and it's like this gross 3-headed committee, but the first week after being signed, I'd really be surprised if Kareem Hunt played more than like 10-ish snaps. Like I don't think he's going to have a super large role, at least in the very, very short term. Then after Carson Steele, we have Zamir White, and this is really like a make or break game here. Zamir White needs to perform or he's going to be cooked for fantasy. The Panthers have allowed the 4th most points per game to the running back position. This is one of the only times where the Raiders are going to be like pretty significant favorites, 5.5-point favorites here against the Panthers. So Zamir White needs to come through this week or he's likely just toast. Then we're going to go with Jerome Ford going up against the Giants. Kind of a tough guy to evaluate here because the usage was really strong in week 1. He didn't really do anything where you would think, all right, he's going to lose out on opportunities. Then we head into week 2, and he's down to a 44% snap share, a 39% route participation. He only saw 7 of the 22 running back carries, and you had Deonta Foreman come in, Pierre Strong Jr. coming in, and both these dudes, got some run within this offense. So maybe they swing back to Jerome Ford being the clear lead guy. I mean, Foreman had a lot of opportunities, didn't do much with it. It's a decent matchup here against the Giants, so I feel like high-end to mid-tier RB3 is where he's going to settle. Then we have Javonte Williams, who had a nice usage bounce back in week 2, 11 out of 15 of the carries, all 5 of the running back targets. Historically, the Tampa Bay run defense has been really tough for opposing running backs for fantasy, but this year, it's been a pretty solid matchup through 2 weeks. Obviously, that's not gospel. It's only 2 weeks in the NFL season, but it's not a matchup I'm overly scared of. I'm more scared of just this Broncos offense looking awful through 2 weeks. And then the final guy in this tier is going to be Chuba Hubbard going up against the Raiders. I do think Chuba now has some life, at least for the next like 2-ish weeks, with Andy Dalton coming in here. Him and Sanders are both unplayable with Bryce Young at quarterback. I think Andy Dalton can at least give something to this offense, get the ball moving. Chuba Hubbard is still the running back one, even if you have Sanders a little bit more involved than you'd like. So Chuba would be the play here. I don't love it. I still don't have a ton of confidence with this Panthers team, but he's at least somewhat playable where he really has not been over the past couple of weeks. And then the final tier here, a very, very large tier 7. These are guys that I don't really love in my lineup, but if you're desperate, I get it. We have some injuries. Starting off with Samaje Perine. I talked about Steele. He's kind of my guy within this backfield, but Samaje Perine, third down role, could get a little bit more than that. A veteran presence here. I think he's fine if you're desperate. Then we have Raheem Mostert, where I'm not sure if he's going to play. He's been limited with his chest injury. If he's like fully good to go, then he'd probably bump into tier 6. But I feel like Devon Achane is just so clearly the top dog there. Even in week 1 when Mostert was healthy, Achane was still taking the goal line carries, which is just a massive hit to Raheem Mostert. Then I have back-to-back Cowboys running backs, Zeke, Rico Dowdle. We did see Zeke get the goal line snap in week 1. That's why I'm kind of giving him the edge here. Even though we did see Rico Dowdle out-snap and out-touch Zeke in week 2, we also saw Deuce Vaughn kind of working his way into this committee, which is not ideal, but I still think these are like the 2 top dogs on a good offense. We just still haven't seen one of them kind of break away. Then after those 2, we have Jaylen Warren, who definitely saw an increase in his usage after week 1, played 31 snaps, same as Najee. Not going to match him in the touch total, but he should have more receiving upside and also just be the more efficient option. Then I have Austin Eckler, who's been pretty decent through 2 weeks. Jaden Daniels been hitting him on some checkdowns. Could be a favorable game script for him going up against the Bengals. I just think his weekly floor is so low because his volume on the ground is very limited. His touchdown upside is also very limited because he's not in there on the goal line. And even if he would be, you have Jaden Daniels who's vulturing touchdowns. So still don't feel great about Eckler. Then we have Deonta Foreman, who, like I mentioned when I was talking about Jerome Ford, had a pretty surprising out-of-nowhere 14 carries. I mean, if he maintains his role as like the lead carry guy against this matchup here against the Giants, this could actually be a decent spot for Deonta Foreman where he could give you a sleeper performance. But after he was so limited in his involvement in week 1, it's tough for me to just think that carry number is going to carry over here into week 3. So could be a sleeper, but not a ton of confidence. Then I have Bucky Irving, talked about how I think he's going to expand his role here, going up against the Broncos. Then we have Gus Edwards going up against the Steelers. Like I talked about with J.K. Dobbins, he's been in a very solid like carry split. He has 29 carries through 2 weeks. The concern is obviously just that he hasn't been good, so he's very at risk of just losing out on that workload. And then the final guy here, Alexander Mattison. I mean, I guess he's been the better option over Zamir White. I don't think this is the game script that favors him. This is like the rare opportunity where the Raiders are going to be decent favorites. I think he's more of like the trailing game script guy where he's going to be the pass catching back. So don't love Madison, kind of getting into the bottom of the barrel here at the running back position. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 20. Let me know your thoughts. Any questions, drop them down below. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.